We'll go ahead and get started, and just assume people will kind of pop in and out as their schedule lets them. My name is Kim Peterson. I'm one of the 6 school counselors at West High. And my piece in this is very brief. I'm going to introduce you to our presenters for the evening. And that really is about it. We have somebody from the National Guard, Mike Mahoney, and he is going to go first. And then we also have Thomas Val from MSU Billings. He's in the financial aid office. Please feel free to, if you have questions, you can put them into the chat room, and we'll try to do our best to answer them as we go. The transitions might be a little bit clunky, so just be patient with me while I go from the PowerPoints in between the 2 presenters. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everybody. Let's see. Okay, I think we're good to go. So we'll go ahead and this is Michael Mahoney.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sergeant Mahoney with the Montana Army National Guard. I'm going to talk very briefly, actually, only maybe 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about what the National Guard is, your typical service obligation, if that's something that you choose to do, and how this really ties in tonight. I'm going to talk mostly about the benefits and education benefits that we have to offer our service members. So the Army National Guard traces its lineage all the way back to 1636. We are the oldest branch and component of military service in the United States. Now, the Army itself actually has 3 components. There's the regular active duty, which is what most people are familiar with. And then the other 2 components make up the reserve component. The 2 are the Army Reserve and the Army National Guard. With the National Guard, obviously we are still part of the Army. We can deploy, we do deploy. We go everywhere the Army goes, sometimes even more so. But our traditional obligation is only 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summertime after you complete training. So, what does service in the National Guard look like? So, as I said, we are part of the Army. As such, everybody has to attend basic training. Everybody has to attend advanced individual training. That's where you get to pick the job that you're going to serve with, and you go get trained on that. After you complete that training, again, your typical obligation is 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summertime, and most contracts are a 6-year contract, but there is a short of a contract as 3 years up to that 6-year contract. So there's different options for how to serve. We are part of the Army, so again, we go everywhere that the Army goes, but we also belong to the state of Montana. So we get to pick up all of the really cool missions like firefighting and floods and civil support, civil disturbance. We've got folks working in the clinics right now in the hospitals, working for COVID support. So we've got all kinds of different state missions that we get to do also. Normally, you're going to participate in the National Guard as close as possible to your hometown. So you're not far away, you're not driving all the way across the state. You're working at home. So that brings in more towards tonight. Serving at home, being able to go to college. Again, that typical obligation, 1 weekend a month. That means the other 28 days out of the month, you are at home to go to college full time, actually attend a trade school, university, whatever your higher education goals, you're at home 28 days out of the month and you're able to do that. All right. Excuse me. So, citizen soldiers allow you to serve the state and country while pursuing your educational goals. We've got some pretty interesting professions currently serving in the National Guard: doctors, teachers, all kinds of law enforcement, skilled trades, most importantly, college students, college athletes, all take advantage of the benefits that the National Guard has to offer. Our biggest incentive that we have right now, you're going to get another presentation here in just a minute about the full total cost of college, university, or whatever. Every soldier that is in the Montana Army National Guard gets 100% in-state tuition waived. So any of the schools, colleges, universities that are in the Montana higher education system, you get 100% of your tuition waived while you are a member of the National Guard. So that is a huge incentive for a lot of our soldiers. You also, everybody is entitled to the GI Bill, which is $397 a month while they're in college as a reserve soldier. You can see the math there on your screen. Depending on how well your student scores on the ASVAB, you can also qualify for the GI Bill kicker, which is an additional $200 per month while you're in college. You do the 4-year total on that, it's over $21,000 worth of education money. It's a huge help for paying your room and board, your parking fee, buying books, all of those other expenses other than tuition. We help you cover that with the GI Bill and the GI Bill kicker. There are also ROTC scholarships that are available. And we've got different lengths of scholarships that obviously have different values depending on how long you get that scholarship for. As of last Friday, the 1st of October, our bonus has actually changed. Our highest bonus now is actually at $20,000 for an enlistment bonus, depending on the job that you would pick. One of the other incentives that you can get is up to $50,000 worth of student loan repayment. Again, most high school students don't have that student loan debt yet, but in the future they may add it. They may take out student loans down the road, and we can build that student loan repayment into their contract right now. Some of the other incentives that parents tend to pay more attention to, we've got life insurance, we've got health insurance. It is incredibly good insurance, and it is crazy inexpensive. For a single soldier, it's only $42 a month for phenomenal coverage. You can see the rest of the numbers on there. We do also have a retirement plan. It is a matching plan up to 10% of your contribution. So how the typical scenario works for a high school student. You enlist while you're in high school. Obviously, you could not go to training until you graduated high school next spring. So next spring, you go to basic training and advanced individual training. You would start college typically the following spring, but you get college credit for your military training. It does depend on the job that you pick, how much credit you're able to start college with, but you do get college credit for your military training. So missing that fall semester is really not a giant drawback. With all of our education incentives, you're going to graduate college debt-free, no student loans. You're going to be eligible for VA benefits by the time you're 24 years old. And as soon as you graduate college, right there about that same time that you're finishing your 6-year contract, you're going to be able to have veteran status when you're applying for those higher jobs, which is most jobs, that's a pretty big incentive and pretty big plus. So I've got contact information down here in the counselor's office. Any of the counselors know how to get a hold of me. I've got some business cards down here and some brochures. If you guys have any questions, my number is on the screen right there. Feel free to give me a call. Or like I said, you can visit with the counselors. I appreciate your time tonight, and let me know if you have any questions. Any questions for on the screen right now, or do we just want to keep moving?
Maybe keep moving, and then are there any questions left?
Okay.
And we can monitor it, and if there's some that come
Okay.
up.
All right, folks, have a good evening, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, let me just switch PowerPoints here. And I will turn it over to Thomas.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you all for taking your time out tonight to talk about financial aid. I know it's not the most riveting subject you could be talking about tonight, but I hope to make this useful for you, give you some information you can take away that will help you better understand the process and hopefully help you gain additional funds for your son or daughter. So we're going to touch on several basic topics. I'm going to skip over some of it that's in depth, but this will be available later. So if you want to go in and look at some of the slides that you'll see, they're a little hard to see in detail. You can pick those up a little later. So some of the topics, how much does college cost? There are some defined costs that we look at. What is financial aid? I've heard people say, oh, I did the FAFSA, but I didn't get financial aid. All I got was loans. Loans is one type. It's called self-help. It's one umbrella of aid. There's other that's gift aid, which we love. Gift aid are the grants and the scholarships you don't pay back. And then how do I apply? We'll definitely go over that too. All right, so how much does college cost? 2-year, 4-year, there is a difference. Public or private, again, a big difference. In-state, out-of-state. What's this WUI, as we call it, the Western Undergraduate Exchange? I'll talk about that. These are definite things you'll want to look into as you start looking at college. And is it right for you to go full-time or part-time? For a lot of traditional students, full-time is the way to go to get through. Sometimes for non-traditional, part-time makes a lot of sense. So we do want to find a college that fits your budget and browse some websites, look at the different colleges and see what they have to offer. Wanted to talk about the WUI program first. There are basically 3 groups when you look at going to college. There's the in-state, which is typically the lowest rate you'll pay for tuition and fees. Out of state is typically one of the highest. Some schools actually have an international rate for students coming in from abroad. That tends to be the highest, but WUI or WICHE, which is the graduate equivalent, is 150% of the state rate. So be careful with this one. All I want to make sure the website is below there, the wui.wiche.edu. It talks more about it. Most of those states you see in the graphic participate, but not all schools give that across the board, and not all schools do it automatically. So while it's, if you're considering going outside of Montana, definitely ask about WUI, and definitely ask if there are any restrictions that can make a big difference in the cost that you'd pay. We wanted to use this slide because the cost is always that biggest question. Can I afford this? And what's going to be my out of pocket? I kind of want to bottom line this thing. This is where net price is helpful. Net price is a concept that looks at the sticker price, and that's basically the 5 elements in a student's cost of attendance. It's room and board, tuition and fees, miscellaneous, book supplies, and transportation. We'll see those itemized a little later. Those are the basic costs to attend. They subtract from that the free aid, the grants and scholarships. And that difference is what they call the net price. This is typically the amount that a student and or parents tend to borrow to cover the cost of education if the free money won't cover it all. Here's a little breakdown when you're looking more at cost of attendance. We've got some 2021 figures for Montana schools. You'll see the range there. And those are the 5 elements below that I talked about: the tuition and fees, book supplies, transportation, housing, typically grouped together with the cost of a meal plan if they're living on campus, and then the personal expenses. So it does vary, and you can see it looks like a high of about 32 to a low of 16, 15 actually. So it does vary quite a bit. One of the concepts that is always talked about, is a little bit confusing, is when a student and parent file for federal aid through the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, is that process calculates an expected family contribution, an EFC number. it's a concept. It's not a hard number. It's not something that is, in my opinion, all that accurate. It's just the federal government's attempt to ascertain a parent's ability to contribute toward a family's cost of attendance. I just put my son and daughter through college, so I'm speaking as both a financial aid person and as a dad. It's doable, and this EFC is interesting, and you'll see how it's used. Now, an important concept of this expected family contribution is it does stay the same regardless of a college. Whether you go to Harvard or you go for your next door community college, it's a number that will be applied across the board against the federal aid and other types of aid that come in. So here's the basic formula: the cost of attendance, those 5 elements I mentioned, minus this expected family contribution, which is derived from the FAFSA and the parent's income, student's income, how many are in the household, taxes paid. It's a number of factors that go into this. Take that cost of attendance minus CFC equals financial need. And if that is in the positive category, that's the need-based aid that a student can be eligible for. All right, so the FAFSA, like I said, it determines the need. You use it to apply for grants, work study, loans. Some state aid looks at the EFC number to see if they qualify. Every family who applies will receive some type of aid. There's very few reasons why they'd be excluded. Some of those involve trafficking in drugs and overpayments, Department of Education being in default. Usually not something that most people run into. Now, for a student to apply for the FAFSA, they do have to have a high school diploma, a GED, HiSET, or some high school completion certificate. That's the basic eligibility. Now, how to apply? Well, it's through the FAFSA. Scholarship applications, I would encourage you all to see this office first. Look at the local sources. Go to your guidance counselors. They're usually the best avenue to look at scholarships first rather than the national searches. Statistically, you're far more likely to get aid offered through your local high school than you are through the national searches. So use what's available here. I was perusing this office and I saw several things on the wall to apply for. So make sure you utilize what's here for you. Okay. With the FAFSA, you do have to apply every year. You'll start with the initial application, and then there's what's called a renewal FAFSA. Be aware of scholarship deadlines as you see them posted. Be sure to get in by then. And talk to your school too about a FAFSA deadline. Many schools have a date. It's not a drop dead date so much as it is a date to have the best shot at available aid. They usually call it a priority date. December 1st, March 1st. It varies, but be sure to check with your school when their FAFSA filing date is. It can make a difference in what aid you can receive. So applying is through FAFSA.a.gov. This is what it will look like when you come into that site. You'll have a couple different options. If you're new to the process, as you see on the left side will start here. You'll supply all of the student and the parent information. If you've done the FAFSA before and you're coming back in subsequent years, you'll do the right side, a returning user. That's called the renewal FAFSA. Okay. So Montana's FAFSA priority date, as I mentioned, is December 1st for the upcoming fall semester. So before you dive in here and jump onto the FAFSA site, you'll want to have some things taken care of beforehand. The student and at least one parent will need to have an FSA user ID and password established. You'll need to create that through studentaid.gov. Some folks will try to go in and do it all at one shot. I recommend, because sometimes there are glitches with getting the FSA user ID and password established. If there are glitches, it can take some time to reset that. So I'd give yourself a day or 1 to 3 days to make sure that that user ID and password is set before you go in. I know that's a bit of a hassle, but I've just found that it saves trouble. And that's why I'm hopeful sessions like this help you avoid some of these pitfalls. So get that established. Have your social security number, birth dates. You'll want to have some income tax records, your federal return, and W-2s handy. Now, the FAFSA several years ago, I think it was back in 2010, went to what's called a prior year, which means they take the federal tax return 2 years prior to when you apply for the aid year that you're seeking. The reason they went to that was that a lot of parents realized that they didn't have their taxes ready, and some of these schools had early priority deadlines, which they couldn't meet because they didn't have their taxes done. Maybe they have a farm, they have a business, their tax accountant can't produce that fast enough. So the prior year ensured that they had a tax return ready on file and they could proceed and complete their FAFSA with that information. So you'll be using the 2020 tax return for this next upcoming application year. And that actually opened just recently, October 1st. All right, so you want your records of untaxed income. Maybe the student worked at a restaurant, got tips, things like that. You just want a record of the income that came in, both for the parent side and for the student. And now you don't include your home or a family farm where you live, retirement savings, or other personal possessions. The value of your business, only if you own more than 50% of the business and employ 100 or fewer employees, that could come into play on that FAFSA. So there again is the site, studentaid.gov. We talked about one student, one parent having an FSA ID. Now that is your legal signature, so please don't share that with anyone. It is your key to access not only to the FAFSA, but other federal sites where you'll be going later to look down on your loans, look down on grant eligibility, things like nslds.gov, which is where the central repository of student loan information. The student will be using that at some point, so please guard that FSA user ID and password. A little bit about eligibility. You have to be degree seeking, you have to be a U.S. citizen or eligible U.S. citizen. For guys, you need to register for selective service. Now, one thing that's important, when you receive federal aid, there are some conditions. It may seem great and you think it's there for the rest of your academic career, but satisfactory academic progress I want to touch on just a little bit. You do need to maintain at least a cumulative of a 2.0. Doesn't sound bad, but college is the next step up, and there's some adjustment that will take place as you get into those rigors. You need to complete at least 67% of the courses you attempt. And there is a max time frame where the federal government will pay aid up to 150% of the courses needed to attain your degree. I say all this just to, if you're not sure what your major will be, that's not a big deal, but I would try your best to try to lock into the program you want to do as early as possible, because the more classes you take that don't apply to the degree you'll eventually get can work against you in some cases and cut off your aid a little bit early. So I just say that as a caveat. Pell eligibility, full-time is for Pell. That is the one grant aid that pays at less than full-time. It pays at 3/4, half, and even less than half. For loans, students need to be enrolled at least half-time to be eligible for that. The dependency question, this is very common. A lot of students say, well, my parents really don't contribute much, they can't, or my parents are divorced, or different situations. Who is dependent and who is independent? If you ask the IRS, they'll have one answer. If you ask the Department of Education, they'll say, well, what did you report on Section 3 of the FAFSA? There's a list of questions there. And if a student can't answer yes to at least one of those questions, they will be classified as dependent, even if they're 23, even if, some other things. Here are those questions. If they're married, well, if they can answer yes that they're married, they're independent. If they're providing at least 50% or 51% actually of dependents care, if they're an active member of the U.S. Armed Forces, if they're an orphan or ward of the court or foster care as of age 13. These are part of those section questions they'll ask. If you're emancipated minor, legal guardianship, if you're going into graduate school, for those who are non-traditional, maybe they've got their undergrad, they're coming back for grad school, that will make them independent. So if you can't answer yes, again, to anything in Section 3, you will be classified as dependent, and the FAFSA will require parent information, at least one parent. And it's generally the parent that provides at least 51% of the support. Now, this is the slide I referenced to earlier that you may not be able to read it. It's pretty small print. I apologize for that. Who's my parent when I fill out the FAFSA? Generally speaking, it is the parent that provides at least 51% of your support if the parents are separated or divorced. Generally, it's the one that they reside with most during the academic year, if they live together. So that's the one you report. This will be available later if you can't see the fine print, but I can take questions later about this. But That's generally who you use as a parent, the one that provides the most support. Frequent errors. Be sure there are a lot of federal database matches when they do the FAFSA. It can be IRS, Social Security Administration, Selective Service, INS, IHS. There are several, so be sure your Social Security number is right. Double check that. If it's wrong, it tends to confuse things, and sometimes students are better starting all over. Divorced, remarried parental information at the time that you do the FAFSA is the status that they want, not what may be in the future or what happened. It's as of the day you do the FAFSA. Reporting assets and income correctly. Again, on that day, it'll ask things like cash savings in your checking. Use that day. Household size. Number in college is important. I will say this, when you get that expected family contribution number, it's a family contribution number. If you have one student in college, it'll use that figure. The moment you get 2 students in college, that effectively divides that expected family contribution in half. A lot of people don't know that, don't realize that. I got a break. When my daughter first started college, there was no Pell, there was nothing like that. When my son and daughter were in the same time, my EOC stayed the same, but that number was divided in half because there are 2 in college. That's a significant increase in costs, and they recognize that. So under the current FAFSA formula, that's how that works. And be sure if they're filing deadlines to meet those deadlines. That can make a big difference in the aid that's available or that you can have access to. Now, when you're in the FAFSA, they're going to ask you if you want to transfer information from the IRS via the IRS data retrieval tool. I'm a big advocate of this because, one, it's quicker, it's more accurate, and it reduces your chances of being selected for a process called verification. About 30% of FAFSA filers are selected for verification where they say, these numbers look a little off, or maybe you double reported things, or maybe your taxes paid just look out of ratio with where they should be for your income level. And you have to supply things like W-2s, tax returns, and other forms. It slows you down. So I strongly recommend if your parents filed jointly, they can do that. If they are married and filed separately, they can't. Unfortunately, it can only handle one parent's set of returns. But if you can do the IRS data retrieval tool, I encourage you to use that. So you can't use it if you filed an amended return. Okay, you filed it, now what? Please keep an eye on your school's web email contacts and letters. Many schools will establish an email through their college that they tell you that's the official means. MSU Billings allows students to use their preferred. Whichever you select, please keep an eye on it because maybe you were selected for verification. The sooner we get those documents back, the sooner we can process and let you know what your aid package will be. Now, on the note on the bottom, if your family has experienced a significant change in income, we do have the ability through a process called use of professional judgment. We can reevaluate if things change significantly. I mean, look at our situation with COVID-19. If there was a change in income, let your financial aid office know. They can take a look at it and exercise that use of professional judgment if it ends up helping you with your aid package, which it can in many situations. A little bit about the federal aid. It does determine through the FAFSA your eligibility for the Pell Grant, the SEOG, other need-based aid. Sometimes different entities want to know just that your financial picture and can result in additional grants. Work study, I'm a big advocate of. I would encourage everyone when they ask that question on the FAFSA, are you interested in work study? I would say yes, because it's money that you earn and that check goes directly to you. Okay. A little bit about loans. There are 2 types, subsidized and unsubsidized. It just makes the difference is who pays the interest while you're in school. Subsidized, that interest is covered. You go into repayment 6 months after you at least fail to enroll half-time, or typically after you graduate, you go into repayment on those. You can use private lenders, but we encourage the federal loans because honestly, the benefits, the things like deference and forbearance options are greater with the federal loans than the private lenders. This is just a brief example of different schools and the costs. The costs vary, as you notice, the EFC stays the same. The need will vary because of that formula. And here's just a different combination of results from different schools. Again, use your local high school office for scholarships. check with your parents. Sometimes they have. Check with your church, co-ops, different things. If you excel in any of these things, there's really two big groups of scholarships. There's need-based, driven by your FAFSA, and there's merit-based on skills and ability. It can be through academics, it can be athletic, it can be other things. So this is a pretty good list to give you an idea what's out there and taken into consideration for those. In addition to your local, be aware of scams. Don't pay anyone to do a scholarship search for you. There are some robust search engines out there like FastWeb and others. Use those first. They're pretty good. Scholarship deadlines, it depends on your school, it depends on your donor, but this is a brief slide to kind of give you an idea of when some of those open up. Do apply early. And again, this presentation will be available again later to kind of get some of this information. I won't go into detail about our system, but I wanted to keep this pretty much to an hour, and we're about there. One other site I want you to look at is studentaid.gov/scholarships. That's a good site as well to give you information about applying for various sources. And there's some other various sources: Health and Human Services, veterans, military, as you said, the presenter before me, that is a very good deal. There are also some specific tribal and Native American waivers for tuition that are very important for a lot of students and saves them a lot, and vocational rehab. So don't say you won't get aid by doing the FAFSA. Please apply. I just urge you to do that. I know many say I make too much money. Well, you can pull in things that maybe you're not aware of. For example, if you have $1 of unmet need, let's say you do that, you do the FAFSA, it does the formula, your cost of attendance is $50,000, your EFC is $49,999, and you have $1 of unmet need. That unmet need can put you into consideration for need-based scholarships. They may not be looking at how much need, just the fact that you are a need-based student. So please do a FAFSA. Please do it early as you can. And please ask questions. So I think that does my spiel. I'll let you kind of go back to the main page, and thank you all for your time.
Hey, that was a ton of excellent information. A question was just asked about whether or not we'll be putting this in a downloadable form, and we will have it on our West High website. We'll try to get that up tomorrow. Let me just really quickly show you how to get to our website. It is, if you go to billingswesthigh.com and then go to departments and counseling, we have tabs both for parents with information that we try to make specific for you that you may have questions about. And then we also have a page with financial aid. I'm also going to be loading onto this financial aid tab. I'm in the middle of putting together a sheet with different financial aid and FAFSA resources for you. So we'll try and get that up tomorrow or Thursday. And then the last one is this college and career tab that also has lots of what we think is pretty useful information for you guys. As long as there's no questions, we will wrap this up. Does anybody? I'm going to get out of the sharing. It doesn't, oh, it looks like we have a couple questions. Okay. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you all for coming. We hope we had some good and useful information for you.
I had a
Yes.
question.
Go ahead, Mike.
So my question was for the other gentleman.
Yep,
Maybe I think
he's still
seems
here.
like he knows his stuff. Okay, hey, so I am a single parent, divorced, and you know the guys at work that their kids that went to college said, "Hey, we make too much money. We don't qualify for anything." And one of the guys said, "You know, my ex-wife doesn't make very much. Why don't we use her as the income? And then, so my question was geared towards that. Okay,
Yeah, very good question, very common question. And the guidance they put on there is to use the parent that provides at least 51% of the support. And sometimes that's a little hard to determine, but generally speaking, it's the one to whom the parent has resided with most during the year.
that is me, and I make too much money.
Well, yeah,
Can we fool the government and get something out of them? Is my
you'll,
question.
yeah, you'll still get offered something. You're right. You probably could get offered more through your wife, but that's the statute. At least that's the directive they give. It should be the parent that, has provided more for the student. It makes sense. It's what the,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Thank you. You've answered my question.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I do, Tammy.
Okay,
Um,
I'm assuming you
so-
don't want to talk to me.
I do, but I want to talk to him. So 51% of the time would be me, but he claims him on taxes. Does that matter?
Nope. That's where I was alluding to earlier. The IRS looks at things a little different than we do. The Department of Education sets up a few different rules. So yeah, whether you or your husband or ex claims them, it is irrelevant. It's who the student spends the most time with during the year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else?
Good question.
We like questions for sure.
If we have, as we go start applying and stuff, are you going to be available throughout the week to answer general questions?
What I'd recommend, if you want to send questions to our office, that we welcome that. Our office is simply at FinAid, that's FINAID, at msubillings.edu. That's our general email site. You could also call our office if you have questions. We're at 657-2188. We'd be happy to answer questions there as well.
Okay, great. That will be a big help, as I'm sure I'm going to need it.
Yeah, it's a little daunting first time through, but once you get through it 1 year, you'll be almost a pro at it, and the renewals from then on won't be too bad.
And then they'll change it all on us, as we were talking about earlier.
Probably will.
Let's see. Yep, okay. And Mrs. Tossi just shared that phone number to the Billings Financial Aid Office with all of you as well. Your kids can also, or you're welcome to call your student's school counselor as well. We are definitely not as well versed as Thomas is, but we certainly can get kids and get you pointed in the right direction if you have specific questions. So that's an option for you as well. So thank you, everybody, for spending your evening with us. Oh, what did students?
Thank you too for your time.
Oh yeah,
You bet.
there's one question here. What did students do? Oh, there was a question that was asked. Today we did college application week, and our designated day was today. The students applied to a Montana school through their social studies or US government classes. The college application day, the students can either have their application fee waived or deferred until they actually start school if they decide to go to that college. I don't know, do you know if that's been waived with COVID this year, or is the?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that that's still accurate information, but college application week is the whole week. So if your student for some reason wasn't able to fill out a college application, they can swing by the counseling office and we can give them some direction. Oh, and I'm sorry, we also have one from Miss Alds. We have tons of scholarships, Amber. Kids can either come into the office. We have a file of all of the active scholarships. And then we also have them posted on both Zello, which kids can get to through their Clever account, or we also have them on our West High website, which I just showed you guys how to get to. Thomas mentioned the scholarships that we offer locally. I think we really encourage kids to apply for those local scholarships. Not as many students are applying for the scholarships. When they're applying for the national ones, they're kind of a small fish in a big bowl. And we have kids who apply for scholarships, and if they really, really, really focus on them, we've had one student in particular, I think the most a student has ever gotten from our local scholarships is between $15,000 and $18,000. So all of those small scholarships can definitely add up. But really, they have to be on top of it. They have to be checking the website regularly, coming in and talking to our secretary, Mary Hall. She's an excellent resource as well. The height of scholarship season, I would say, is between December and January through March. We don't have a ton of them in right now. But if you go to our website, you can click on previous year's scholarships, and we have the same local scholarships year after year for kids to apply for. So you can kind of start to look and get an idea of scholarships that you think your student might be a good fit for. You're welcome. Any other, I'm just looking through this really quickly. And it doesn't look like we've had any other questions. Anybody else want to throw anything out there before we end the Zoom? We really, really appreciate you guys taking time out of your night to join us. We like it when we have these events, when we have good participation like we've had tonight. So thank you for that. Have a good rest of your evening, and feel free, if you have questions, to email us or email Thomas. Yeah, have a good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thomas says goodbye too.
Thanks for attending.
Oh, Thomas, thank you. That was so well done, and I
Oh,
could
thanks,
even
Ann.
understand.